And like, I'm happy to share like what our cost per case is, like stuff like that. Like, I don't really care, like we can share that stuff. Why? It doesn't matter.
Why?
Because it doesn't phase anything. What, just because we're spending more money or less money than other people just determines how good we are, right? It doesn't necessarily determine what they should do differently. It's not giving them any inside secrets.
Oh, of how you're doing
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I'm just saying, like, if we're looking at what our cost per sign cases, it's fluctuating, but that's because we were penalized by Google in terms of like the verification thing, which we can talk about that too.
So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Make sure that you can hear okay. You should be able to hear decent. Good?
Yeah, I can hear you really well.
Nick, thanks for joining today, man. I'm excited. You and I were walking over to lunch and talking about online marketing, pay-per-click, but that personal injury and legal spending is like the NFL of online marketing. I mean, it is the amount of money that people pay per click is crazy. So if you make mistakes here, you could wind up spending a lot of money in a day.
Yeah. So I mean, it just really depends upon the size and the volume that you're trying to go for. And in the term of what we're kind of doing, we're currently going through a growth phase. So with the growth phase, we're spending quite a bit of money. It's not where, like, if you look at the e-commerce world, they're spending maybe $5-10 a click, at most, to try and sell a t-shirt, because
Right.
that's, but they've got to have pretty razor thin margins if they're trying to do it that way, or their t-shirts cost a lot of money, right? So, you realistically break it down, like, our cost per clicks are insanely high.
Like, can we, for listeners who are just joining, can you give an idea of what
Yeah.
and now we are, let's scope it a little bit, because this is a car accident attorney law firm where
Yeah.
we take on cases that aren't, or that it is not their fault, right?
Mhm.
So it's a personal injury attorney.
Yeah. And I can realistically only speak for Texas, because we're not really advertising in other states.
Okay.
So the Texas market is one of the top 3
But
markets.
it's one of the biggest markets. So if somebody's listening and they're in Tennessee, it's still going to apply to them.
Yeah, exactly. So Tennessee's, their prices might be a little bit different than ours. A lot of it is because of the laws around here. What we're able to actually bring in. So, like, for example, Pennsylvania, their minimum policy limits are like $15,000 on a car wreck case, whereas ours are 30 here. Right. So if we can pop policy limits at 30K, we take 33.33%, which is pretty much the Texas standard. Right. So if you take into consideration of that, our average fee should be somewhere around that $10,000 range, but it also increases and changes based off of, all the different trucking and things like that. Because MVC cases carry higher policy limits,
what?
motor vehicle commercial cases. So like 18-wheelers, the big trucks, those kind of things. So there's a high potential for like big volume cases here. However, in order to actually get those cases, you've got to have a high volume of spend in order to get some of those big, like, what I like to call a needle in a stack of needles is one of my mentors used to always say that. He's like, these are cases that are, a needle in a stack of needles, in terms of like, you got to find one very specific needle, but you have to be able to go through all the needles ahead of time and collect the ones that you want. But the problem is it's very expensive to do so. So like what Tennessee or what Pennsylvania might be seeing for their average cost per click might be somewhere lower than, like, maybe lower than $100, which, that was nice when it was in like 2019
for here. But if we're talking about the most competitive market, then it's going to be easier. But I've seen some spends of $700 a click.
Oh yeah, no, we're upwards of like 800 right now on some of our campaigns.
Just so we're clear here, I'm not. This is not conversion. This is
just a click, just for somebody to click onto our ad. It's like upwards of $800. Yeah.
So the pressure here is high, because if that landing page is not, this is different than, hey, I've got a landing page, I'm trying to collect an email address, and I'm trying to convert. Like, that your landing page has to convert at like what, 70% or something?
It's got to be really, really high. And that's one thing that we try to focus on very heavily, is because like, we know how the consumers are. They want to focus on what they need to focus on. So you put everything big and bold in the right middle, and you have to direct them right down the funnel. There's no additional sections that you want to give people to navigate to. You want them to get, if they're not within 2 clicks and on a page filling out a form or giving you a phone call, you pretty much lost it. Like there's no way that you're going to be able to retain that person that's going through. They're not going to click 10 different pages and still convert. They're going to get bored, or they're not going to focus. That's why TikTok is so big, is because it's 7+ second like 7+ second videos that people are even more focused to. Like when Vine came out, Vine was huge because it was 6 seconds max. You had 6 seconds to make an impression on somebody, right? And that has dwindled down. Every single person is now so used to watching short videos that if you're not doing something within the first 10 to 15 seconds on your website, you're losing them instantly. And so that's why we want to have stuff that's pretty instantaneous and pretty quick in terms of like actually getting them to focus on what we need them to do and driving them down the funnel, rather than continuously sitting at the top of the funnel, clicking onto different pages that don't matter, clicking onto different things that they're just curious about. Like it's great for them to be able to see our attorneys, but at the same time, just based off of looking at one of our attorneys, it's not going to necessarily determine whether or not they decide to click all the way through to the funnel. Let's just send them within 2 clicks to the page that they fill out a form or they give us a phone call.
Well, I got a question, because at 7, 8, 9, I mean, it fluctuates, right? So this is average. You could spend $1,000 a click.
Mm-hmm.
You really need to pre-qualify them on that click ad, meaning in your case, it's, if it's not you can't have people who it was their fault calling you, because that is a waste. So are you really dialed that in on that front?
So we still get those. And no matter what data you send back to Google's never going to be able to figure out whether or not they were at fault for an accident. That's such an
I know, but could you just say it? Could you just be like, hey, if this is not your fault?
Even if you put in, we only do car accidents, people will still call you for MedMal. I'm not kidding.
Real.
I'm not kidding. Yeah, people will not read the fine print of the description of a Google ad.
Doesn't that kill you when you get that click and it's $800?
No, what really kills me is the people that think that they're smart and they're Googling car accident lawyer in Dallas, Texas, and they click on my ad and they're trying to sell me something. Half the time, I just want to turn around and send an invoice of the price of the click and be like, "Hey, pay up in order for me to talk to you." So it happens so much.
I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, to be honest with you, I was sitting here today working on some other stuff that we've been working on, and I Googled Angel Reyes and Associates to get to the website, and you obviously come up in the sponsored ad, and I almost clicked it.
Yeah, don't do that.
Just because it's first, right? And have it. And then I went down. I mean, that sort of stuff can happen. I do have a question for you. Let's talk about that real quick. So one of the strategies I don't understand completely, and there's been a lot of debate in my marketing, like this closed group that I say closed group. It's like
the secret society,
whatever you want.
The secret society of marketing geniuses. All I know is I will answer this if I get the invite.
SEO people and stuff. Is why buy your name when you've clearly organic SEO? I mean, you are at the top, and there's been a lot of debate about why waste the money. Even you're spending a lot, but other people, e-commerce engines and or e-commerce companies and brands are all doing this when you are going to come up. I understand that a competitor can bid your name. I do understand that, but it is most likely that person, see, sometimes I think, Nick, we get like too geeky about this. The person has typed in Angel Reyes and Associates.
Yeah.
They want Angel Reyes and Associates website.
Yeah.
They are not going to click the competitor. They didn't. If they did car accident attorney, we're in a different ball game. But if they do that, or they typed in Patagonia, Nike, or something else, why bid on your own name?
So let me ask you this: you have a car, right?
I do.
You pay for your car insurance?
Do I? My wife pays that,
okay,
but I do. But we pay for
you
car
guys
insurance.
pay for car insurance.
Yeah.
So if we're not bidding, sorry, if we're putting an advertisement out that has our name on it and doesn't have a dedicated phone number, or maybe it does have a phone number, and they type in our name and somebody else pops up at the very top instead of us, it's for insurance purposes.
I just wonder, like, how much is waste.
Absolute sure. I mean, even if it is a waste, but you have to consider, like, and here's something that I do get frustrated with, very much so, because I understand where you're coming from in terms of waste on a branded campaign, because our branded campaign is so expensive sometimes because we do have a lot of people that are bidding on them. And what's even worse is we constantly have like providers that are calling in on our advertisements and they're clicking on our name on our branded campaign rather than going to our Google My Business page or whatever. Those clicks that don't cost you for every single time that somebody clicks your ad and then calls your number on your website or whatever. That happens a lot and it's really infuriating. But at the same time, I would rather make sure that if I have 3 or 4 cases coming from my own branded campaign and it's spent a little bit more than what we're willing to spend on some of the cases, it's worth it, because had those 3 or 4 cases gone to somebody else, that whole TV campaign we just ran, not worth it. Not worth it at all. Because if we're losing out on those impressions that are dedicated impressions that want to convert, it kind of stinks, right?
I think it feels good as a marketer to have the insurance. I'm very curious of what the numbers look like on the spreadsheet when
Yeah.
when you actually calculate. Like, I understand it makes you all of everybody.
Yeah.
It clearly makes everybody feel better because you're not the only one doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, every
No.
big brand agency is.
You'd be surprised, though. There are some competitors that don't even bid on their own name, and they have the same thought process as you.
Yeah, but I wonder what
they're being eaten alive by lead generator
How
companies.
do you know that?
Because I can see that their ads are being beat out by these lead generator companies, and those lead generator
But you're
companies,
not seeing the organic SEO conversion rate on the back end in their data marketing analysis.
True, but I mean, you could pretty much infer from what's actually going on. They wouldn't be bidding on that name, especially if you know how expensive that name is. They wouldn't be bidding on that name if it wasn't converting for them.
Well, I'm not convinced that everybody has in-house marketing like you in their place. Like, they're using agencies and the agency sells them. And then respectfully,
let me say respectfully, I love the fact that lawyers and law firms still have agencies. Keep doing what you're doing. It makes my life a whole lot easier.
What I'm saying is I'm not sure that those agencies, I mean, we know the math, right? You get the sale, you have some young people. Some of them are very, very good, but it's very hard to be very, very good managing 5 clients who are spending $100,000 a month on 1,000 keywords.
Yeah. No, I mean, put it this way. If we were doing stuff at the scale that we're doing now and we were running through an agency, I don't think that we'd be able to actually get to the scale that we're at.
That's my point.
But that's just the way it is. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. If you really want something to scale, you need to have the internal accountability for it. That's just the point blank flat. Because you can fire an agency at any time, right? Who cares? But when you have an individual that their sole purpose is here to drive cases, to keep this place alive, and they see the people that they're trying to keep this place alive for, that gives them an extra step and an extra reason to get up in the morning. That gives them an extra reason to stay a little bit late to make sure that the ads are running the next day properly. Right. That gives them another reason to make sure that they make it into the meetings with all of their team to make sure that things are running the way that they're supposed to be running. Gives them another reason to pull that extra spreadsheet to make sure, okay, what can I do to drive this case down or this cost down? What can I do to bring in more cases? Are there any patterns that I need to recognize in order to move things along? That's the stuff that keeps you pushing, and that's a different level that you're not going to get from an agency, because the agency looks at you like a number, man. Like, if you're a client,
and you've had some experience with agencies. We're not going to name any, but
yeah, no,
I mean, and you do have a consultant. Do you still have that person? I mean, who helps you?
Yeah,
which I think you need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So his name is TK. So he just goes by TK. That's what we're going to go by. He's a really, really smart guy. So
you do have some assistance in that.
Yeah. So he realistically executes some of the stuff that we sit down and talk about. So we have kind of a round table, pretty much just him and I every single morning. We go over what we're seeing for the numbers. We analyze the patterns that we come up with on our own. We bring them to the table. We discuss, okay, is this what you're seeing as well? Maybe you want to dive into looking at it this way versus this way. And that way I'm not doing all of this in a vacuum. You know, I have an internal team to do this for a reason. So then that way I'm not making my own decisions on a panic basis. There's some thought process behind it. So if he's panicking on a specific campaign and he's like, this one is spending way too much and it hasn't driven anything yet, it's like, okay, instead of worrying and shutting down the entire campaign, how long has this campaign been running? When did that spend start getting out of control? When did things start changing? Let's go through the metrics. Let's go through the thought process. Let's find where the pattern is, figure out what broke the pattern, and continue down the path of rehabilitating that campaign and getting into the right direction, rather than panicking and being like, oh my God, this is spending way too much. We need to shut it down. No. Because if you shut it down, getting it started back up is even a bigger nightmare, because it takes even longer than that 2 weeks that it was out of. Yeah, exactly. So Google's algorithm takes a long time to learn. So if we're going to sit there and play with the algorithm, let's not play with fire. Let's play with a little bit of water to make sure that things are operating correctly. Let's find, instead of taking the whole ship that's got a leak somewhere, and instead of just saying scrap the whole ship, let's go figure out where that's leaking.
Right.
Go down into the hull and say, okay, let's trail this water. Is this water coming out of this spot or this spot? And then if so, let's shut that down and let's see if we can then clear out the water, reopen that up, and see what happens.
And you're doing that every morning.
Yeah, every morning, every afternoon. I'm also doing a lot of focusing on it late at night before midnight because, I want to make sure that all of our stuff is running for the next day. Because realistically, if we're not taking a look at that stuff on a daily basis and we're not making adequate decisions on a last 7 days, 14 days, 30 days basis, man, we're struggling.
So let's zoom out a little bit, because you are doing everything here. I mean, there's
I wouldn't say everything.
I mean, your marketing campaign here is broad, meaning you do have a TV, you do TV. It's not often that you see, really, unless you're a big firm, doing all this integrated stuff. So you're doing TV, you're doing pay-per-click on high cost clicks. You're doing Google Local Business, which has its own like game, right?
Yeah. We still consider that PPC, but it
why do you consider PPC?
Because you're still paying for that click. So Google Local Service Ads, right? That's what you're mentioning, right? So when people still click through to give us a phone call on that, we still pay for it.
You're still bidding on that.
Yeah, but it's a world of a difference. It's $300 for a lead instead of $300, $900 a click. So that's why LSAs is like a whole different ballgame.
So with that in mind, why don't you just lean in? Do you not get enough traffic?
We have that shit turned up. Excuse my French, but like we have that stuff turned up to like maybe 1.2 million is what we're willing to spend on that in a month if it's willing to actually give us that. But it's not going to. There's not enough demand for it. But we're telling,
because they're not because you don't think the consumer is using that as
no. So it's not necessarily that. So local service ads is still just as competitive. Don't get me wrong. However, it's every single lawyer in the space. It's every lawyer that's willing to take on that type of case. And that's okay. But at the same time, you have to stand out through a bunch of different avenues. So, and I'm not going to get into them because I don't want anybody to figure out how I pull my levers. It's the nature of the beast is keeping things a little bit closer to your chest. But, the biggest thing that I've always kind of come along with local service ads is like, if it runs well, it's because of three main things. I'm not going to get into those three main things, but you're looking at driving
because of the way the algorithm basically weights these elements of your ad and its response rate, et cetera.
Yeah, you're looking at driving a cost per signed case on local service ads at 10% of the price that you're driving on regular search. But at the same time, obviously everybody's going to say, absolutely, dive all into that. I can dive all into it I want, but there's only so many people that search on keywords that are activated by local service ads on the targeted keywords that we want.
Are those local service ads better? I mean, this goes back to something you said, like they type in car accident attorney and they're calling you for a slip and fall.
Yeah.
Right. So are those, because the math, just because it's relatively different or the price is relative. So just because it's $900 a click doesn't mean that $300 a click is actually cheaper, because it all matters what your conversion rate is in your waterfall.
Yeah, but here's the thing that local service ads does is it takes out the headache of actually navigating the keywords itself. You don't actually get the keyword data though, which sucks. That's the one thing.
So you get around it, but you can't get the data.
Yeah, exactly. So Google essentially puts in this entire black box in terms of LSAs. So LSAs, you get a black box, and you essentially, for that black box, the only thing that you really get to see is what practice areas do you want to turn on and which ones do you want to turn off. Under the avenue of personal injury, you can turn on.
And your text though, right, too? Is that true too? The text that you put in, like can you keyword stuff it?
Oh. Nope. People have tried. It looks insanely goofy.
It does, but whatever.
Yeah, but you don't pop up for keyword stuffing for LSAs. So in terms of like what LSAs is really trying to do is they're trying to give you the adequate leads of the case types that you want without having to create all of the headache of a whole brand new campaign, right? And don't get me wrong, we still bid on the same keywords that LSAs is bidding on, because sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't pop up. So like it triggers when it wants to, which is a very strange nuance that I don't understand still. And like, don't get me wrong, I'm still digging.
No, you have to
Yeah.
collect an enormous amount of data to see the trend, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so like when you take a look at the LSA portal, you can turn on and turn off certain case types. So for example, this was originally built for plumbers, right? So this was built for plumbers, and to begin with, that was the first
Oh, is that
service
was the
area
first?
that Google local service ads was giving.
Got ya.
So plumbers were the whole, that was their whole thing. And then they started slowly rolling it out to different services. So like now they have, estheticians. You can have, I think they have, obviously barbers, kind of the same thing. But you also have, man, I looked at this the other day too. I can't remember.
Oh, you and I looked at this actually last year. You walked me through this.
You were looking at possibly doing it for one of your businesses, and it did not.
It didn't even
unfortunately.
Yeah,
it did not
we need to look again.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really selective. But the beauty of it is like, because it's really selective, like if you end up getting that ability to look at it, it's kind of nice, because if you get the opportunity to actually navigate that, it kind of changes the dynamic in your PPC, and it allows you to really continue working towards some of those higher cost campaigns, because this lower cost campaign can bring down the overall cost per signed case from everything else, because you're looking at such a small fraction of what you're spending and what you're getting back in return that can help you. Like LSAs is our highest producing campaign.
So what's and this could be a completely dumb question, but the LSA you pay for.
Yeah.
But how is Google balancing the LSA with just normal Google local, the
local service pack?
Yeah, like I put in. So if I put in, let's just use this example. We'll use car accident lawyer near me.
Mm-hmm.
Is Google says it feels like is incentivized to push the LMS versus just the map thing.
You would think, but the crazy thing is it's completely sporadic. I have
so it's random.
It will sometimes turn on and it will sometimes not.
And so sometimes it just goes to, do you have your business as a local? What's the normal local business directory called?
So like the local 3-pack is what you're talking about. So like the 3-pack that advertises, you're talking about like the maps where it actually shows you the maps near
Yeah, like
you
my wife has a dog agility thing, and she goes in and puts in Half Moon Bay Dog Sports, and when someone does dog training, it pops up in the map, and then I get her Google Analytics, and I can see that she is getting traffic for that, and she is not paying for that. That's not
Yeah. So that's the Google My Business page.
Right.
And so the biggest thing is like, I don't know the difference and when it decides to pop up, because I'll type in car accident injury lawyer near me on Monday, and local service ads will pop up. But when I type that in on Thursday or Friday, I don't get those, and I get, like, it's very strange. And that's just an example of like, it will pop up sometimes, but it also won't pop up other times.
It's probably just it's probably just a fake out, because Google doesn't want people to think that they're only pushing paid ads.
So here's
what's your theory?
Here's my thought process. Because local service ads don't pop up, that doesn't mean that ads don't pop up. It has other search keyword ads
that makes more money,
and those are $700 a click. Right? So think about it this way: it wants to pop up, but also at the same time, if it doesn't, it's not a big deal. They're not gonna bat an eyelash like, oh no, it didn't pop up. We got a little bit more. We've got 3 ads at the top. Click. Dang it! I don't know if they're determining based off of the profile of the individual that's Googling whether or not it should show or whether or not it shouldn't show. If they're a new,
maybe if they clicked before,
if they're a first time person that's Googled that, it pops up. However, at the same time, I always use an incognito browser when I'm Googling this stuff, because I want to make sure that it doesn't know what my history is.
Right.
Mainly in terms of like, I want to see what the real authentic stuff is going to see. So like somebody that just got into a car accident, that hasn't been in a car accident, that Googles for the first time, car accident injury lawyer near me, I want it to treat me as such.
Right.
Because that's what a good marketer does. It's a real genuine test. Like, because I'm in the heart of Dallas, I'm Googling car accident injury lawyer near me. And sometimes the local service ads pop up and sometimes they don't. That's the hard part of like trying to get it to trigger consistently, is that's a black box that Google doesn't want to give you. And that's fine. Keep your secrets.
I mean, Google has been black boxing everything for a long time. I mean, even the normal ads are a black box.
They're
right?
black boxing.
I mean, they do
stuff on a daily basis.
They write. I mean, we all try to figure it out. They tell you like, oh, well, it's your response rate and it's your click through rate. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, dude, I'm killing it.
Yeah.
and you bump me.
You're like, yeah, like what happened? And we got penalized for the advertiser verification
So let's
thing
talk
back
about
in.
that. What happened?
Oh man,
You were very upset.
I didn't sleep for probably a week and a half. That was a tough day. That was a very tough day.
What happened?
So I was,
because this is a good lesson for listeners.
Yeah, so Google came out with this advertiser verification, and if you haven't done this yet, I don't know when we're launching this podcast, but at the same time,
I think we're going to launch it tonight.
Okay, if we launch it tonight, that's
or
a good
tomorrow,
idea.
depending on how much, because we're going to a baseball game tomorrow night.
Yes, we are. So Google is currently pushing to get more advertisers verified or re-verified. I'm not sure on if it's because of legislation or exactly like what they were trying to do, because there was all this legislation in California trying to make advertisers more inaccessible to private data and all these other different things. So it might have had something to do with that. But so back in November, it was just before Thanksgiving, so everybody had kind of left. I was still one of the only ones in the office. So in order to complete your advertiser verification on Google Ads, you have to submit all of the information based off of the individual that's running the advertisement. So it's obviously our CEO. And so we have it posted as him, because say if I were to ever leave, or my team leaves for any reason, we don't want any of that to carry with us. Angel owns that. It's his own thing. He has all of that data going back to 2013, because that's the way it should be. A business owner should always have access to their own data. Listen to me, agencies. I'm telling you right now, figure that out. I know very specific agencies, but I'm not going to.
Well, they don't, and it's lazy and it screws up everything.
It's agencies do it in terms of making sure that they don't have the questions being brought to them that aren't controlled, but at the same time, it's causing them to have more questions if they don't have data access.
Yeah, let's not, you and I go down a rabbit hole.
That's going to be a whole different thing.
So,
but anyways,
so it's all, so this is the important part is, if you're listening and you own a business, you need to have this stuff. You need to be the quote highest access admin.
You need to be the owner of the entire account.
Right. And then
there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. If somebody's trying to reach out to you and tell you, hey, you need to let me create your Google Ads account, okay, create it, but you're going to create it under my Gmail.
Yeah, my Gmail.
My Gmail, and I'm going to change the password after you're done, and I'm going to have access to the ownership of it, and that's the way it is.
So let's go on. So anyways, so it's Thanksgiving.
Advertiser verification comes around. I get an email. It says, hey, you should start this. TK and I started talking about it. I was like, yeah, I should probably start it. Let's get that done. And I was just thinking, okay, there's two parts to it. So you got to go through. You have to just verify who your CEO is or whoever's managing the account. So you just verify the information of the business. So you say like what type of business, all these other different things in terms of like what you're going to use the account for, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a little survey on the first part. Easy peasy. I've done them at least 100 times on a whole bunch of other things, anytime that we get set up on new tools or whatever. And so I complete the first section and I get to the second section. And it's asking for like documentation. And I'm like, oh boy. I messed up and I do not have the documentation. And so I'm like, you know what? I've got time. I'll get this done when everybody gets back from break. And as soon as we get back from holiday break or whatever with Thanksgiving, everybody's back in the office. Of course, I've got a million emails that are getting sent over to me because they were out for 4 or 5 days or whatever, and they're trying to get stuff scrambling done and taken care of now. And so I'm getting all of that stuff sent over because I also do all of our technology and all those things too. And so they're like, hey, we need this, and this. And so I'm focusing on that. And by the end of it, like I neglected the fact that I needed to do the advertiser verification and finish it out and ask for those documents. And so apparently Google throws on an arbitrary 30-day timeline from the moment you start advertiser verification to the time that it needs to be finished, or else you get paused. And so because I started it, there was a ticking time bomb. And I had no idea that there was a ticking time bomb. It was not super apparent. It was not very clear. And at the same time, I will still take ownership. This is my mistake. I should have just gotten it done. Should have written it down somewhere. Should have done the right thing. Don't get me wrong.
Stuff happens.
I'm more than willing to admit when I made a mistake. And this is one of the ones that I made a mistake on. And so come December 14th was when it came down to it, when I get an email as I'm literally working at my desk in my house. And I get an email on my Gmail and it says, hey, your ads have stopped. And I'm like, for what reason? And so I go through and I start scrolling through and reading, and it's saying that I got paused because of advertiser verification and it expired. I was like, okay, let's get this done now. So I'm immediately frantically calling our CFO. I'm calling our other account executive that's handling all of our accounts and stuff. And I'm texting Angel, like, send me a picture of your driver's license, like doing all these different things and trying to get all of this documentation to verify us. And we weren't paused for more than 12 hours. We were unpaused that next morning by 8 a.m. And so once we were unpaused, the crazy part is the data that we had, it pretty much felt like it was completely voided and null. So
all your history
so
data?
it had the history still, but it wasn't operating like we still had the history. And
the
so
algorithm reset.
Yeah, so we went from, and like, I'm not going to say what we were really spending, but I mean, like, we were going from, signing, dozens of cases a day, like dozens, to maybe getting a handful of leads in a day. That was it. And that
basically business comes to a halt
pretty much,
because this is not to get, I mean, you do get referrals and I want to talk about organic SEO, but you are effectively relying on pay-per-click.
It's about 80% of all of our incoming signed cases. So
a month.
Yeah.
Forever.
Well, we have some months where it gets up to 85.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and so,
the verification, is there a master deadline, or does it? I saw something actually when I was
that I think is coming up, and that's why Google's now sending out a bunch of emails to everybody telling them that they need to get advertiser verification taken care of. So that's coming up. I don't know what day it is. I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, let's look it up. You can look it up while we're talking, because I saw something at the top of my Google Analytics probably will stop processing data.
Yeah.
Oh, that's something
30
else.
days is when the time to initiate to the verification should take. It takes 30 days.
That's important for any listener out
there. That was my fault. Is I should have Googled that, but it doesn't tell me a specific day of like when it has to be done.
But it pops up. It does pop up on your.
Yeah, and it's also asking you if you run election ads. Like, that's another big thing that it talked about, which, like, we're not running election ads.
But I think that's an important for anybody listening, just to make sure you double check that, because if you stop the ads, I mean, your business comes to a screaming halt. So do you think it needed to relearn, or did it catch up?
But here's where it became an absolute nightmare. Is December 14th is right before Christmas, and when we're getting a handful of leads, there's not many people that really Google over the course of the holidays. And so because we weren't getting volume, we weren't able to get things started.
So it was like lower part of the season.
Put it this way, it was like us trying to ride a bike with a loose chain. Every time that we'd catch a little bit of like some grip, it would come loose. And every time we'd get it back on and it would come loose because we didn't have the volume.
Right.
So if you don't have volume, you don't have data going back. If you don't have data going back that's helping you, you're kind of in a tailspin. And that was exactly how it felt. And, it took us a few months, but now we're setting records again, and we're signing more cases than we've ever signed. But that was many, many sleepless nights, many, many weekends where I sat down and went through to make sure that everything was being taken care of properly. Many, many headaches of trying to figure out why this stuff isn't working, or certain campaigns aren't working the way that they used to, et cetera, et cetera. But now we're at a pace where it's like, our set goals that we have for the month, every month is it's the expectation again. And that's a good feeling, but it took months. It did not take days. It did not take hours.
Now I remember you told me.
It didn't take weeks. It was awful. It was so miserable. I'm so very used to and I will give him a shout out from now until the end of time. One of my mentors, his name is Eric Cullenberg. He taught me so much stuff about Google Ads that I then was able to take all of the basis of what he gave me and continue to expand on it. And so when he decided that, his time with the firm had come and gone, and he decided that he wanted to go off and do some other adventures, I was terrified to start. But the more that I started diving back into things, the more I realized that he had trained me to be able to grow and be bigger than what we were. And so we continued going on in that path to the point where I just took everything that he had, and we've just built on top of that foundation, which is a very strong foundation. And now we're at a point where, you know, we're like 500x of what we were at the time that I took over. So I'm very used to winning, and I hate losing.
Yeah, I
Like,
understand.
if anybody ever watches the show Shoresy, it's like, I'm from northern Minnesota, so anything about hockey or anything about like Canada and jokes like that, like, I understand at a very homegrown level. And so there's a line in Shoresy where he says they're frustrated because their team keeps losing. And he's like, what, they don't like winning? He goes, they don't hate to lose. I hate losing.
Yeah, I
so
hate
much.
losing more than I like winning.
Exactly. And so, you know, like, losing over and over again when I hadn't lost in a long time sucked. It was the worst.
It was every once in a while. It's
Dude,
a good
it
lesson, right?
was a great punch to the face. Don't get me wrong, but we figured it out. We're always going to stand back up after we get hit, you know, but that's just what it is.
So one thing I do want to touch on here, I don't know how much you're willing to talk about maybe the systems and whatnot, but it's one
whatever
thing,
you want to know.
So it's one thing to, you've got to figure out your Google ads. I mean, I wouldn't even know, you and I probably could spend 10 hours on how to like, we're not going to teach anybody how to run Google ads in this episode, or like, you need, it's just
get a Google ads account, look at it on a daily, figure out exactly what your cost per sign case is, move forward.
Well, first learn the UI.
Yeah.
Because the UI is not
yeah
necessarily as easy. But
those are just my 3 bullet points.
I think
I don't want to give any more.
I think those are good. But you also, to get the convert, like, it's one thing to get the sort of, if we were to map this out, we've got our front of the funnel and we have all the things that we're doing to get these clicks and to get leads in. And then there's, okay, you got to design your landing page, which you touched on earlier, to basically convert it.
Yeah.
Or either convert it or weed it out fast, basically, is to qualify it. And now we actually hit the office.
Yeah.
Meaning, ultimately, I think your goal is not a form.
It's a phone call every time.
And if they do a form, you're calling that person within minutes, right?
If it's not called within the 60 seconds that it hits, we know. I can figure out when the phone call is placed.
Well, so let me.
I want to know if we have phone calls that aren't placed within 60 seconds of the time that the form hits into our system and into our database. That means nobody's grabbing it quick enough.
Right, but if you, every minute that fades is the likelihood that person's not going to pick up exponentially, right?
But so here's the thing: is like the big problem in PI is how competitive the space is.
Personal injury for listeners.
Yeah, personal injury. I apologize. Personal injury law. I'm so used to this environment. When I started here, I had no other background. So it was.
And just for listeners, Nick could be a lawyer. He's like going into this. We were doing some keyword stuff earlier. He's like going into telling me about the case. I was like, appreciate that, but I have to, and you do have to know that.
I have to give credit to Spencer Brown and Ryan Brown and Tim Riley and Angel Reyes, all of our partners that we've had in my tenure here, and they've done a very good job at teaching me, you know, the laws around personal injury and
you do have to.
I've got to know that in order for my sales team to be able to walk into my office and say, hey, this happened. This is what's going on with the insurance. Can we take this case? Yay or nay? And I have to be able to be the one that's like, okay, yeah. Or I have to be the one that says, you know, this is a little iffy. Send that over to the lawyers. And this is also what they're going to ask for. Make sure you have that so they can make a yay or nay decision.
Right.
You know, but.
So let's go back to the systems. Let's not lose that. So the call comes in. And my point really is for people listening, and is that when you do get a form, one is, let's establish you want to get a phone call. We'll talk about that in a second, basically how you're getting them to do that.
Yeah.
Number two is, if they do a form, you have got to call that. Like, what would you say on average before that lead is like goes from 90% to 5%?
Put it this way. So I understand where you're trying to go with that question. The problem is I don't have that actual. Well, I don't know what I don't know because I don't know that. But what I do know is because of how competitive it is, it's probably the same amount of time for them to swipe back, click on the next ad, submit another form.
So that's how fast you can
We need to beat that other law firm or any law firms that they may have submitted an ad to before that. right? So say if we're not popping up at number 1, but we pop up at number 2, and they did the same thing for number 1 that they're doing to us, and they're doing number 3. We need to beat number 1 and we need to beat number 3. So we have rules in place that say, okay, if our intake agent hasn't reached out to them within 60 seconds, we're in a world of hurt. Like, that's not good. So I can see when our first
24/7.
Yeah, we are now. We are now.
And when you did that, you saw, because you and I talked a little bit. I mean, you saw significant. I mean, it's obvious.
Yeah. If you're not advertising on Saturday, Sunday, you're just completely missing 2 days of the week that you could be signing
Like,
cases.
you're not going to be like, oh, hey, call back on Monday. They've already got
If you shut down at 6 p.m., man, I'm telling you, if anybody even happens to land on your website, they've already found another lawyer by the next morning. Like, you've got to do that. You know, it's a no-brainer. That was one of the biggest things that we weren't doing before that we are doing now is we're operating at different times. So we used to have stuff go to like our outside call center, and we try to get as very few calls that come into our firm. We try to get as very few of them over to our call center. So
we just don't convert.
No, and like, I mean, we were looking at our conversion rate. They convert at maybe 13% of the leads that they get, you know, and that's just super low. So like, if you're looking at like the ones that we get, like on what our typical average and what we consider our firm, if we're doing all the right things in our sales department or our intake department, we're converting at 50-55%, which is really high. But that's across all leads that come in. That's also
what I was going to ask you, because you're weeding out people who fell and slipped and still called you.
This still counts into our close
rate.
Right? Yeah. No, we're not weeding out the case types or anything like that. Like, if it's a wrongful case type, so be it. The reason why I have it that way is because I want to marry marketing and intake. That's the way it is. Right. So if my marketing is screwing up and we're advertising on stupid campaigns that we shouldn't be advertising on, that tells me that our close rate is going to be low. Right. But if I don't have that metric, how do I know?
You don't.
Exactly. And so that's why I've always said, and like my intake team has been mad at me. They're like, why is it that we can't
because
factor
they want
out wrong case types? Because they want 70, 75%, 80%. Of course, that's more fun to look at than 30, 40, 50%. But it's like, okay,
we're a team.
Let's realize this. We are tied together no matter what. It is literally a marriage of 30 years at Reyes Brown Riley or Reyes Brown Law, right? So, you know, that's just the way it is. It is like, we are married, and whether we like each other or not, we are going to be stuck together, and that's just the way it is.
Because without you, they don't get the intake,
and without them, I don't sign the intake.
Right.
Exactly.
So, yeah, everybody's on the same team. But exactly. Do you back out just for their good graces? You don't even back it out?
No, because as soon as you start catering numbers to people's feelings, it's all downhill from there, man. It's all downhill from there.
So you don't even throw them a bone?
Nah. We give them incentives based off of, you know, like what their close rate is overall. Yeah, right. You know, so like if they're doing well, great, cool. Here you go. Here's $5, whatever. You know, it's not actually that. But
no, right, we know that. So you want to get, that's important. You've got to get, as soon as you get a lead. And I think the important part is somebody who's listening here is like, oh, I'm not in a law firm. It's not that competitive. Look, if you actually do it, your rates are just going to be through your convert rates are going to be through the roof. So you want to do that. Let's talk about when they click, how are you getting, because this is a bigger discussion. How do you get them to call? Because in general, let me use a podcast as an example. What people will say is, oh, well, advertise, put your podcast, put some shorts from this that we're doing and put it on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
It is very, very hard to go from, let me watch the short of Nick and Brandon talking about marketing, to get them to click to Spotify or their preferred podcast to either watch it or
subscribe,
to listen.
Oh, yeah.
Because now that they're watching, now they're listening. Now, if this is a YouTube short,
mm-hmm.
and we send them to the YouTube video, that's more likely because they're in the same app watching. But what you're doing is you're actually going from a manual process, although they could do, now with AI, they could actually probably do better search, but let's not get into that. They type it in, they're on there, and you're trying to get them to do a phone call.
Yeah.
How do you push that?
So
I mean, someone could just go look at your landing page, right?
But, yeah. So I mean, have you ever
heard?
Have you? Because it's funny the way that I think about it, and everybody thinks I'm kind of crazy for it. But it's the same concept if you have a child, right? So pretend your consumer is the kid, right? And you're about to leave, you're going to go to the park and it's raining. Okay. And you want them to put a jacket on. They don't want to put a jacket on ever, right? They don't want to put jacket on or boots, right? So you have to tell them, okay, do you want to put on your jacket first or do you want to put on your boots first? And they get the two choices and they pick one. It's not in terms of like, okay, I want you to go down this road, but it's do you want the jacket first or do you want the boots first? Right. So, and like for listeners that aren't watching, I'm handing him the boots, right?
Way out front.
So I'm showing that I want him to go to the boots first. And so he'll grab the boots, put his boots on, and we'll go play. Right. Like that's the whole idea. So in terms of trying to get people to call, if I have more spots for them to make a phone call or to click a button and call than I do for them to fill out a form, slowly catering them.
So
I'm slowly conditioning them to call rather than to. And if my text is telling me or is telling them, hey, give us a call now, I'm not saying submit a form. They still have the ability to submit a form.
They can see the form.
But
there's
more buttons to make a phone call. So, I mean, that's my claim to fame and trying to get people to convert. And one of the beauties of landing pages is they don't have anywhere else to go. So you either click or you call.
Well, here's an important part of that you just joked about that, but I've argued. I don't argue with people. Argue with me about it, and I just throw my hands up because eventually you're not going to. I'm not saying these people are stupid, but either sometimes people aren't going to acknowledge your position because their position depends on not acknowledging it.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're just dumb. And if you argue with dumb, they're always going to beat you with experience.
I was
always going to beat you with experience.
I was always told you can't argue with stupid.
Right. So, but having said that, that landing page should have nothing else.
Other than the necessary information that you need to give them.
And they'll say, oh, well, I need the navigation. I need the about. I need all that. No, there's no more.
That hurts you.
Yeah, there's nowhere else to go. Your landing page should only have, and this is really important, and I'm going to emphasize it, and some people listening will be like, oh, I already know this. Yeah, but how many people are you doing? Because I don't see pages that I can't get out of. I see pages I can get out of, not pages I can't get out of.
Yeah, exactly. And so one thing people fail to realize and remember is their systems that they're so used to is not necessarily the best practice. One of the things that we operate here is, and like Angel will talk about this top to bottom.
And for those listening, Angel's is the founder of this firm. He's been around. Angel Ray's been around 30 years. So for context.
Gotcha. So Angel and I've drank the Kool-Aid. I firmly believe with him too, that even though I'm sitting here having a podcast with you, I already know that I'm not the best at this, but I can learn from people that might be better. Right. That's the whole idea. And we're always open to trying to learn new things. I'm not gonna push away from somebody that wants to teach me something, because if I learned anything out of it, that was worthwhile, because I can apply it to whatever we're doing. Right. So, I mean, as much as I want to complain sometimes about some of the things that I do watch, and I'm like, man, I didn't learn anything, but what if I had? What if I had figured something out that made sense, or something that clicked along the lines of like what we're trying to accomplish, and I can put that into what our stuff is. And maybe that's what the secret sauce is. Like every single ads person is a mad scientist. And the further that you can push yourself away from Dr. Dr. Jekyll versus Mr. Hyde, right? So the further you can put away from Mr. Hyde and focus on Dr. Jekyll, and not get into that angry fashion of like sitting up against a tree like this when there's a whole forest, that's your benefit, right? Because there's a lot of people that want to act like mad scientists, like they know how to figure out Google's algorithm. I'm gonna tell you right now, Google doesn't even know Google's algorithm. It's literally crazy. And what most people don't realize is like their algorithm alone, and this is kind of a cool story that I heard the other day. So Google's algorithm originally did not know Bengali. And so somebody typed in one simple sentence in Bengali into the algorithm, into the search. And within 30 different times of having a conversation back and forth, the algorithm knew Bengali, all of it, the entire language. And Google was like, it's not designed to do that at all. And that's the scary thing, is Google doesn't even understand Google's algorithm. So if I'm going to sit
I think
here,
that's why Elon Musk is saying that, like, hey, we might want to take a step back on AI because you
exactly.
don't quite understand what you just built.
And that's the thing that I'm most scared of, like now too, is like for those that don't know, I operate in our marketing and I operate our technology as
It
well.
was in the show notes, but
Yeah. So
you basically do everything from marketing to IT to getting my card when I come here to be temporary. I mean,
which was funny because I had that built before you and asked.
I know you did. You did. I was grateful. Thank God.
But yeah, it's just, the scary thing about AI is, there's, and I guess this is another story that I heard, and I don't know if this one's true, because I don't know if I trust the source. But what I've heard is some AI that has the open ability to do whatever it wants to do was basically given the access to do what it wanted to do, and it was already trying to get through reCAPTCHA by hiring somebody on one of those like Upwork sites. It was already trying to hire somebody to actively do the reCAPTCHA for them, which is terrifying. Like, that stuff's built out so you can't natively create logic in terms of being able to hack into somebody's system for their bank account or whatever reason, right? So there's reCAPTCHA that's AI is already trying to figure out ways around it, which, don't get me wrong, it's hilarious that AI is trying to hire somebody to get stuff to cause harm, which is crazy, but that's just what AI does. AI just
doesn't know good or bad. It just
does what you tell it to, right? And so that's the scary thing, is if you put it in the wrong hands and you give those hands the worst type of knowledge, and that's dangerous, they can do some really, really horrible things with it. And especially with how fast that stuff is, man, it's terrifying.
Well, and I mean, not to go down that rabbit hole, but it is what I gave a talk yesterday on AI to the Direct Sellers Association. And what I said is, this is a Robert Bannister moment. So Robert Bannister broke the 4-minute mile in 1954, I think. Mm-hmm. And up until that point, no human had run a 4-minute mile. And then within 3 weeks of him running that 4-minute mile, everybody was breaking the 4-minute mile. Mm-hmm. And that's what just happened. And with ChatGPT, well, and it's not just OpenAI and Stanford, a group of Stanford professors just cloned ChatGPT 4 for $600. Mm-hmm. That was what, $10 billion investment or something crazy like that, right? And then
rip off and duplicate.
And then the other day I saw now DALL-E 2, which I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying DALL-E 2 is out, which means you can bring it in-house on your own server and train it to your own data. And my other example is that I do have a Tesla X, and I am in the beta self-driving, full self-driving, and I get, for whatever reason, the updates ahead of people because I watch Twitter. And they're like, how'd you get that? Right. I mean, there's a whole bunch of groupies. We're all like nerds, right?
Groupies.
But so I got two recently. And Nick, that thing, it used to be, so about 4 months ago, my wife and I would joke every time an update would come. We got I'd say, oh, well, that's like a 14-year-old driving. And then it was like, oh, okay, I'll give this is like a 15-and-a-half-year-old driving. This is driving a car in traffic with everything. Mm-hmm. The last update, truthfully, is I press the button from my garage and it drives me wherever. It drives me to the gym because I really don't go too far. It's like
an Uber.
Every day.
Yeah.
And it is like a 32-year-old. Yeah. And when you think about how rapidly that just happened, and then you think about ChatGPT, which ChatGPT, and I don't want to get into it, I did a whole thing on this, like ChatGPT is a really cool linguage. It appears smart, but it's only as smart as the data. And to your point, if the data you point at it points to a bad place or something, it just goes.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes that Angel, our CEO, always says is, he says, "I know enough, but only enough to be dangerous." And that's the scary part, is like some of these people that don't really know how far AI can go, if they really do like joke around and point it in the wrong direction, it can do.
It doesn't have a throttle.
No, it doesn't. So ChatGPT does have the ability to do temperature and tone and all those other things. But in terms of like, if you continue to grant it access to more and more things, that temperature and
well, you have to know
at what point do you have that be subjective versus objective?
Well,
right?
and you have to put the parameter on.
Exactly.
I mean, this is a whole nother discussion. So let's not go. You and I go down that rabbit hole. And hey, you're using it here, which is creating, and this is a whole different topic, but creating amazing efficiencies.
Yeah.
Like you guys were talking at lunch, basically taking time to end product in like, it's not half, it's a hundredth of the time.
Yeah. We're trying to essentially cut out, put it this way, there are a lot of stuff in legal that like people just genuinely can't do. Like
you can't do it because it's so boring reading 2,000 pages.
But like at the same time, it's not even just that. It's just how do you actually fathomably get enough people to be able to sign on to want to do that and do that all day, every day on every single case that comes in when you have 5,000 plus cases? You just don't. And so essentially what ends up happening is, like there are certain cases where we will do that stuff for, but at the same time, if we were able to do that on every case, imagine what we could actually have as a work product at the end. Terrifying, right?
It's terrifying, but I'm going to stop us and pull us out of this rabbit hole because we got to go back to the phone call.
Yeah.
So we're back at the phone call.
You started this, by the way. I'm going to say.
I take responsibility. I'm going to get us back out onto it, which is basically they're on the landing page. Do not put links that are not. Do not put other links. Trap them.
Yeah.
And
the only links that there should be that are there are either to actually make a phone call or to actually submit a chat. So
then the next stage that people don't realize is now you have to, I was actually talking to Jim, our friend, and my friend from business school, for those listening, and sort of how I got roped in here. And he said that I said, hey, who wrote all the scripts? He's like, oh, well, Nick wrote the scripts. I was like, what do you mean Nick wrote the scripts? And he's like, oh, well, Nick wrote a lot of the scripts. You actually have to write the script for the person on the phone to be able to convert. And my point for listeners is really, Nick, is going through this funnel to say, you've got to really pick apart your customer experience and your customer journey to understand marketing. And a really important thing that you said was, understand the metrics and make the metric. They want the vanity metric, but that's not the best vanity metric for the company.
Yeah.
So you got to get the right metrics, and then you've got to create all of these things. So you wrote a lot of those scripts for the.
So I've tweaked the majority of our scripts. So they were written by my predecessor.
Okay.
So he wrote them, but we've refined them.
But he just wrote the scripts, like just started somewhere?
Well, so every single piece in the script actually has a purpose. And so that's like the main thing is like every single word that's in our script is there for a reason. And we even talk on day one of like whenever we bring on a new trainee, we explain the entire script and every single word and what it means and why it's there. So like, we have our opening or whatever, like our greeting, and if you call in, all you'll hear is one of our intake agents saying, thank you for calling your 5-star injury lawyer. My name is so-and-so. Are you calling in regards to a new case? Right. And so we've tweaked it over time. So we used to have it be, thank you for calling Ray's Law Firm. Are you calling in regards to a new or existing case? And what we started noticing when we were listening to the call recordings is everybody would just say yes. And we're like, what? Which one? So we got rid of the second choice. It's again the same thing as like, do you want to wear the boots or do you want to wear the jacket? That kind of thing. So we don't even give them that choice anymore. We just say, okay, are you calling in regards to a new case? And then they give a yes or no response. So the idea around that is to make the whole conversation more simplistic for the user.
Easier to understand.
Because if you can realistically have them, and a lot of it is built around sales tactics, like I refine the scripts in terms of what I know from my sales background. And so if you're able to get people to say yes 5 times, it's the 5 yes rule. If you get them to say yes 5 times, you'll get them to say yes when you want them to sign the contract or sign on the dotted line or buy your product or whatever it is, right? So it's the 5 yes rule. If you can get them to say 5 yeses to you over time because you're asking yes or no questions, you just got your first one. Right. And so that's the whole idea and the whole concept behind it. And I mean, like, what if we have competitors that are listening to this? Good luck.
That's not rocket science.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not. I mean,
most of this is execution, Nick.
Pretty much. But the problem is actually getting your people to do it. And that's why I say good luck.
That's execution. And I'm just going to say an analogy because I can't help it is that and I'm an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are always so protective of their idea and so protective of their business plan.
Yeah.
And I got to the point where I'll give you my business plan. Go do it.
Because if you can do it, then okay.
Yeah, I mean, it
Great.
is so hard to do.
It's so hard to duplicate stuff.
And it's so hard just to do it. It's still hard for your guys aren't perfect.
Put it this way, when we went live with Litify and Salesforce, we are more than willing to share what we've built and like the reason why we've built it, because if they want to go build it and spend the time and the money, good luck, but we're still going to be 2 years ahead of you. You know, right. Now we're going almost 3 years ahead of somebody that takes on what we're doing, you know, and we're trying to advance things further, you know, and that's why we're talking. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of AI and stuff, but you know, it's just, if you really want to take the product that we have and try to tweak it or refine it or do it to yourself, like go for it, you know, but at the same time, it's going to make us better, because then we have to change our tactics and we have to advance and we have to evolve. And that's just what it is.
So the intake agent goes through a script and they stay on the script.
Yeah. So they're
not allowed to go off the script.
They can go off, but I've always talked to them in terms of like, okay, look, you have to understand this whole thing's a railroad, right? You can go off the railroad, take these different tracks, but you always have to find your way back down this tunnel, and you have to go down the tunnel and make sure that everybody stays on the train while you're going through the tunnel. Because when you come out the other end, it's a taken care of and it's a done deal, and that's the close. And so I always say, like, the close is the most important part, is because if you're following the script on the close helps you close itself. And so it's all done and taken care of. It's because of how it's worded. It's how it's built. You're trying to do all of these other things that you're trying to actually manipulate some of the mind games of things in terms of the sales process, right? So it's the 5 yeses before you close them. It's the keep it short and simple. It's the, you know, preemptive strikes that people talk about, you know, like before they even ask the question, answer the question that you know that you've had
the objection.
Exactly. And so it's like, you know, a lot of people will say like, oh, okay, so what do I owe you for this consultation? What do I owe you that for blah, blah, blah? That's already fixed and done with on the ad. The ad flat out tells them it's a free consultation. Like you have no problem calling us because we're not going to charge you anything. But if we sign them, they're then going to ask us at some point, okay, well then what do I pay you guys per hour? And we don't work on an hourly basis. We work on a contingency fee. Right. And so like what we always say, and it's verbatim, and this is still the same section of the script that Eric wrote. And it's, you know, obviously there are fees for what we do, but we only charge a portion of what we win for you. Right. It's short and sweet, answers the question. Right. And then we go through the whole scripting. We tell them exactly it's transparent. Like it's,
you have to be.
It's the Texas average, 33 1/3% of what the overall gross fees are, like what the overall gross recovery is. That's what every other lawyer charges. You know, and if they charge less, that's a red flag.
Right. How are you? The question is, how are you doing that?
That's them trying to sell themselves to get some more cases from these bigger firms that understand it takes 33 1/3% to be able to handle these cases, you know, and handle them in the right manner, you know, because if they're doing 25%, they have to literally cut corners in order to make that case work for them, you know, because they're not going to get the bigger settlements. They're not going to get the maximized recovery that we always talk about. Like that's our biggest thing, is we'll maximize your recovery across financial, physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. You know, like that's our biggest thing, is we want to make sure that you are exactly the way that you were when the accident happened, if not better. And you know, everything's been taken care of for you, because you had a headache going through the whole thing. Like that's unfortunate. Somebody decided to be negligent and text while drive, and then they rear-ended you, and now your neck hurts every time it rains. That sucks, you know. Like you deserve some compensation for that. Like that's just somebody being stupid. Why should you have to pay the price because they decided to be dumb? Like that's the way I see it, and that's the way that most of America should see it, you know. But the problem is I'm not even
going to put that one on Twitter. I'm gonna use AI and convert that.
I'm not even going to go down that whole rabbit hole, but like the whole frivolous lawsuit thing just drives me up a wall. But
well, look, I don't disagree. My mom got rear-ended, and it really bothered me because it wasn't her fault. Her neck hurt for a really long time. You sort of like go down this place, and you know, we're on this earth the best we know right now, one time, and that's it. So It sort of sucks. But no, you and I, could belabor that for 3 hours, but we're back at the agent. The agent has a script, and then the agent or the intake agent or person, their goal is to convert them and get them signed up on that call.
Yeah. And we've noticed that there's an 80% drop in being able to sign the case if they get off the first call without signing the case.
Without signing
Yeah,
it.
if they don't sign it's
How do you
80%.
get them to sign on that call? You send them an email with a signature thing?
Yeah. We just use a sure sign. So a sure sign's built into Litify. So we just automatically pull whatever the fields are that we already filled out on the survey. So like we go through a questionnaire, and so that's where the questionnaire goes along with the scripting. And so when they fill out the
while they're
questionnaire,
talking in the conversation,
exactly. And so they send that out. It already has all the form filled out
on the email.
Yeah.
And do they
It goes
stay
through
on the
email
call?
and text message, and they'll go through the call. They'll tell them, "Hey, I just need you to do me a favor. Go ahead, put your phone on speakerphone. I'm going to talk you through how to open the contract, how to read it, exactly what it means, and we're going to go through it together, and we're going to get you signed up and get you taken care of today." Right? That's the whole goal, is to get them taken care of today.
So how long does that just is that a 30-minute call?
It can vary. So we have
depending on the complexity of the case.
I think the fastest that I've ever seen is probably about 15, 20 minutes.
That's
the fastest. But I mean, like the average, probably around 35, 40 minutes.
Just to go through and qualify it too.
Yeah, and that's like what I tell my intake people is like, you guys also have to understand that there's a concept in sales called quality time with qualified people. If you're spending more than 4 minutes with somebody that has no business signing a contract with us that we can't help, why are you spending 4 minutes when you could be answering more phone calls in those 4 minutes that come in that could be qualified? Right? So if you know that case is going to sign, or like if you know that that's a qualified case, I would rather you spend an hour on that call and get it signed the first time rather than lose the actual ability to sign them because it drops by 80% later down the line. Like you have a 20% chance of signing that case if you get off the phone. That's it. You went from being able to sign that qualified case at 80 to 90% to now you're looking at 20%.
And you have investment happening here. So you've got the click, you've got everything that happens on that website with Litify Salesforce. You've got a phone call that happens. Now you've got that person's expense. So if it's $900 a click, you could be $1,200 into this at 30 minutes. You might as well try to close it because you are going to lose. It's not just that $900.
Exactly.
It's adding up.
I mean, you also have to think about all the tools that they're using as well.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So like you have to think about the
what would be a tool? What would be an example?
So like Invoca, for example, you and I have talked about this before, and how we have dynamic phone numbers on our website. So that costs money every month to have.
Right.
I mean, it's pennies on the dollar compared to every single phone call that we get, but still, you got to take that stuff into consideration. On top of that,
that's basically your contribution margin on the variable, taking out variable costs.
Paying for the actual phone system itself to be able to answer the phone call.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. It all gets pretty expensive, But at the same time, if you're continuing to advance and you're continuing to grow the firm, and in terms of being able to have more and more of like a net revenue at the end,
are you running those contribution margins?
As far as I'm aware, I think they are. They don't let me in on those meetings.
Oh, well, I mean, so that's an interesting topic. I did a whole conversation on this with the CFO, actually, and there's so when I used to run contribution margin at America Online, I sat in marketing, but I needed finance.
Yeah.
Because in order to run contribution margin, you've got to pull out your variable costs, which will be in the SG&A, because those your call center people could actually be sitting on your G&A as employees when your cost for contribution margin actually needs to be pulled out to go into the cost of, they do X amount of inbound calls spread across their cost. So that's why I was asking you, because what we're talking about here, not realizing, or someone listening not realizing, is we're really building the contribution analysis here.
Yeah, in all reality, yeah. But I mean, I've never really pulled that data, so I can say that we probably don't. We probably don't have that, but we have an idea, probably like a high level idea. Because I mean, you can get down to it to the penny if you really want to, but do you really want to spend more time doing that when you can really?
Well, you're managing by net profit, right? You're basically managing by profit, but for your sake, a contribution margin analysis would eventually.
So we have something called our tool spend, which gets assessed to every single case that gets signed.
So there you go. So you are starting.
So we are technically doing that, but it's a very high volume. Like we just take what our average tool price is over the course of the entire month, and we split it out on a percentage basis to every single case. So if PPC signs 80% of the cases, it gets 80% of the tool spend. So which stinks, but it is what it is. It all averages out to everything gets the same price overall across the board, and like our tool spend goes down the more that we sign. So like if we sign, if we sign, 100 cases more this month than we did last month, that tool price per case goes astronomically further
Yeah, so
down.
you are doing contribution margin, and I think that's important. And I say it a lot, because if you don't understand your contribution margin, then you are shooting blind on a marketing spend basis.
I still think that there's a lot of firms out there that don't even know what their attribution is.
I'm sure that
Yeah.
I mean, that's the case with all business. And I mean, then once you convert them, we don't even need to go into that, because that's really just a process. And for anybody listening who doesn't have a law firm, that's product fulfillment.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like that's, and there's you're using Salesforce to manage the cases all the way through, aren't you, from a project management standpoint?
All the way through until the very end of accounting and stuff like that. I mean, we have an accounting software as well to like make sure that that's the law of accounting.
Yeah.
But Salesforce doesn't really have.
Salesforce is your system of record that everything is tying into, from your Ring Central to Invoca and 10 other things.
And Google Ads, but
is Google Ads tied?
I think I told you about that. But no, it's the ad spend. I was able to figure out how to put ad spend inside of Salesforce.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a whole thing. That's one thing that I'm actually kind of excited to talk about that. So we're going to. I haven't really like announced that yet.
What do you mean, to the firm?
No, like, so the firm knows that I do it. But like, so we go to LitiQuest every year. I've done presentations the last 2 years. The first year I talked about automations and building things to help your firm.
Just advance. For listeners, what is that?
So Litify is the company, right? So Litify is essentially a company that builds an application on Salesforce's database in order for law firms to be able to have more of an out-of-box solution to their database in total. So we weren't necessarily an early adopter of Litify, but we've been with Litify for quite some time.
And Litify, does it like automate processes out of the box, sort of, or
not necessarily? So a lot of what they do is it's the object creation and the narration of like the actual fields and objects. So like instead of having, so Salesforce's standard objects are leads, accounts, contacts, and opportunities, right? So your lead gets converted into an opportunity. From that lead, you then have the opportunity, you have the contact for the opportunity, and you have the account. So the account is the business, the contact is the person at the account, and your opportunity is what you're trying to sell them at that given time, right? So here we have intakes, parties, and matters, which intakes and matters are two completely custom built by Litify. And they have a whole bunch of other products that are built onto it. And whatever, which is really cool. And it works for out of the box solution. However, you still have to, if you want it to get to a different level, you have to kind of take ownership of it and continue creating more things, which when we go back to, like 2020, 2021, when we had gone live with Litify, we were really realizing how expensive it really is with Salesforce. And we were kind of having a little bit of what I call buyer's remorse. And a lot of people would call buyer's remorse as like just oh my gosh, this is expensive, because Salesforce is expensive.
It is expensive.
But at the same time, it's so worth it for the money that you pay for it, because it does things for you, And so a lot of.
So you were speaking at Litify.
Yeah. So we were able to build our systems up to be robust enough to the point where they recognized us as some of the higher achieving firms, because we were doing more things with our systems. And so LitiQuest is like their legal conference that they run every year, where other vendors get to come in and try and sell to people that are currently on Litify. People come and have conversations in terms of
conference, knowledge sharing.
Yeah, and it's also a Litify sales deal as well, where they're trying to bring in their prospective clients to come and see what's really able to be done. You good?
Yeah, I'm good. I was like, something's like, I feel it vibrating, but go ahead.
Is it my hand or my phone?
I don't know.
I'm going to tuck this down here just in case. But anyway, so I taught the first year on automations and building, different types of automations, how to automate, what to automate, and why, right? So kind of the basics surrounding the flows, as well as, like some of the process builder stuff, which they're sunsetting, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Workflow, some of the other different automation pieces that they have in order to ensure data validity, as well as people are doing things that they're supposed to be doing. And also making sure that your reports and dashboards make sense because the data is correct.
Right.
So I taught that first year on that. And then the second year I taught on how to actually manage teams based off of the metrics and reports and dashboards that you function. So like we have a huge dashboard that is really robust surrounding our marketing as well as our intake team. So I can see what my marketing is, where my marketing is working. And I can also see like who's doing the best. So I can see what my close rate is on all of my agents. I can see who my best agent is right now in terms of how many cases they've signed, who's been working the hardest, claiming the most intakes, taking the most phone calls. I can see all of that on this dashboard, which is fantastic.
Because you integrated Ring Central, which is your phone system, into Litify, which effectively is integrated into Salesforce.
Yep. Okay. Exactly. And so that dashboard is really cool. And so I had an idea last year, and it was really funny because I just like kind of put it out there. I was like, if any of you have figured out how to throw in, marketing data into Salesforce, hit me up later. Like I want to talk to you. And I had somebody reach out to me and they were like, yeah, hey, by the way, you should check this out. And they just kind of pointed me in the direction and I went down that rabbit hole. And I spent a whole weekend getting all of this stuff prepared. I had free trials on all this other stuff. And so I ended up finding a way to navigate a whole API between Google and Salesforce, which hasn't been done yet. And
so now you have your marketing spend in Salesforce by case?
By intake that gets signed and campaign.
So you're building contribution margin almost in near real time.
But the beauty of it is it is real time. So I can see on a daily basis where my cost per signed case is.
Right.
And I can have it tell me that without having to pull a spreadsheet.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
By agent.
I don't go that granular. I thought about that and I was like, it's that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing. I'm going too far down the Mr. Hyde path and I need to go back to just being a scientist.
Just have some overall data would be
exactly.
helpful.
And so, it just helps us make decisions way faster, and that was something that I'm kind of hoping to talk about on LitiQuest. And I've already talked to some of the people at Litify. I've kind of given them a glimpse as to what it looks like, but my biggest thing was like, if they want me to talk about it, I'll talk about it. But like, that's going to be something that's a big difference in terms of like what people want to see that are marketing. They want to be able to see in real time what their spend is and where it's getting allocated.
Of course. I think the danger in the real time thing is, and you talked about this way, way earlier in our conversation, was you can have knee-jerk reactions and be like, oh my God, this thing spiked to $1,500, when ultimately over time,
it balances.
And if you screw that up, you could shut something down that
made no sense. So why not have the ability to change the actual time frame of it? So you can change it from today to last week to last month, last 14
7 days,
last 30 days, last 60
so
days.
So you got to be. My point is you got to be able to.
And I can do that in a blink of an eye.
But you also have to, in your brain, remind yourself to do that, to bring it back.
So we don't really look at it in terms of like a daily thing. Like we don't make daily allocations. Like we barely ever touch it on a day-to-day basis in terms of like what's going on. We'll discuss what we're seeing. We'll see if the pattern makes sense over the next course of a couple days, and then we'll make the adjustment.
How long do you let a experiment go?
It really just depends, because there are some experiments you want to give some good runway to. So some experiments I'll give money runway and I'll have time runway. So those are two different things. So if I give it an adequate amount of money in order to push it, but for example, like on just a standard Google Ads campaign, I'll give it 20K and just say, hey, here you go. Let's see what happens. Which like 20K is more budget than what most people will run in their entire like account in a month, but I'll give a budget 20K, say, hey, here you go. See what you do, and then make tweaks as it goes. Like once it gets to the $5,000, okay, what is it brought in? Okay, once it gets to $10,000, okay, are we getting better or are we getting worse? 15,000, better or worse? 20,000, all right, let's assess, see what happened.
Is that you do that more often than you do more budget based than time based?
I do more budget based more than anything, mainly because if I'm not giving it a fair budget, how do I expect it to work over 14 days?
Right.
So if it's getting a fair budget, I'm seeing the impression share is showing certain things. I'll make that.
Do you let Google decide that? I haven't been in Google Ads for a while because I was doing Facebook ads.
No, but that's the beauty of having it known in real time. I can tell when that impressions or not impression, when that test started.
And but are you letting Google make the decision how fast to spend the money?
Yeah, I mean, but so in terms of like using their algorithms,
Yeah. So
yeah,
so in like a Facebook ad,
I
you
don't
could.
do any manual bidding. I don't have a single
Okay.
manual bidding
So
campaign.
you are letting it optimize
Mhm.
your spend.
Exactly.
So that 20K could go in a day.
Oh, easily. But the problem is you got to make sure that you're actually watching it and you have your margins set correctly. Because if you have your margins set incorrectly, in terms of like, you know, because Google has multiple different bidding types. You know, if you're looking at, you know, maximize conversions, or if you're looking at, you know,
That's what I'm
return
asking
on
you.
ad spend or whatever. Then you also have target CPA and you have target
And
ROAS.
you're putting limits on there, catch limits.
So essentially, it's not even necessarily the budget limit itself, because you can increase the budget limit to whatever you want. I mean, like
No, you're putting limits that says, hey, if it reaches 1200 and I don't, then stop. Or
no,
you're not.
no, I just pay attention to it.
You're just watching it.
Yeah. So like if we start
So you have
seeing
no
it,
life.
if we yeah, pretty much. No. I do. But no,
you did
just,
play softball last night.
I did play softball. I do play hockey 3 nights a week.
There you go.
I also work out, you know.
Yeah.
But this sounds more like an ad for myself.
Well, I was just happy. It's like, hey, this is the reality of a marketer.
No, it's intense. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like the beauty of it is like I don't necessarily have to worry, because 9 times out of 10, the way that I like to, and this is the way that I relate it to, is I very much so have my restrictions set in terms of like what we're willing to spend, not on the budget, but on other things, on other levers, which I'm not going to get into.
Right.
But I essentially basically take Google and I put them down. I put my foot on their throat and I hold a gun at their head and I say, if you spend more, I'm going to know. And it will try, like I basically do it where I choke it and release it a little bit here and there to see if it will eventually do what I want it to do.
Got it.
And once it catches, then that means that we're starting to refine in micro doses, essentially. And then so from there, then we'll tweak things as it goes. But for the most part, man, we are choking the crap out of that algorithm, saying, I dare you to move. And then once it does start moving, then we pull it back into the reins of where we want it to be. And then that's when we start refining it in terms of getting the right cost per sign case on those things. And that's a really gruesome analogy, but it's very close.
Yeah, right. I do have a question that came to mind on fake clicks. Is that a problem?
Google's pretty good at picking it up.
They are.
A lot of people really want to go and say, oh my God, you need to get ClickCease. It's like, dude, I haven't seen a difference in the ClickCease return on investment than Google. Like it's.
You mean Google will catch it and decide, be like, hey, that wasn't real?
Like, don't get me wrong. Like we'll see spikes, and like there'll be times where it's like, oh my God, we spent like $6,000 in the last 10 minutes. What's going on? Google then just reverses it. They just discount
because they know that.
Yeah, and so like that integration that I built into Salesforce, that will even pick that up too, which is really cool. Because I have that back.
Because Google is keeping track of what your quote unquote normal response rates are. So if it sees some spike, it knows something's
some crazy spike from the same phone number, the same IP address that's in the same realm. Like it's gonna figure that out. It's pretty good.
And
like,
do you have you had any problems where you've had to call Google and be like, hey, look?
We had one incident where there was one campaign that spent about $12,000 in the span of a day, and it normally spends about $1,000. And we're like,
but was it like, were they easy? Like, hey,
yeah, no, they were like, yeah, no, that there's clearly an error there, and they went back and fixed it, and that wasn't a problem. But like that integration that I built into Salesforce, I even have it taking that into consideration, because Google will go back days, and it'll change your ad spend. So like I don't ever consider the full end of the month until the 3rd day of the next month, because our ad spend can still fluctuate on those last couple days
that they're adjusting.
Mm-hmm. So my system and my system that's built for between the two APIs will go back and look at the most recent 5 days when it updates.
Do you have a dedicated Google person? I mean, you guys spend a lot of money.
Yeah, but
so it's not worth. So I mean, I technically have this dedicated Facebook person.
That, good for you. We don't.
Well, occasionally rotates.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's just like Google.
But they never tell me anything that they're not. Anything. I hate to say this, they're not smarter than we are, which is a problem. It's like if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm scared as you know what, and that's what scares me. is that the Facebook person isn't smarter than I am? Yeah.
No, and so
I'm not busting on Facebook, but it's reality.
Yeah. So and here's my thing is, again, I look at those individuals that operate with Google that come out and reach out to us more in terms of like agencies, kind of the same way. They have a general understanding. A lot of agencies have some really smart people. Don't get me wrong. Like I've worked with some agencies that really genuinely have some really intelligent people.
Are they still working for you?
Some do, some don't.
Yeah, I'm half joking. My point is that
yeah, they're not here for a reason. Yeah, I get that. But anyways, no, like my whole kind of my point is
I think people are going to think we're anti-agency. We're not anti-agency. I just want looking for a good agency.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've been in this business 20 years, and there's been a million they do marketing to create agencies. I'm not anybody listening to this knows that. So when that happens, it's half scam, not scam, but they're not qualified. Anyway, I don't want to go off. I'm not anti-agency.
Freaking agency salespeople.
It's just like when you see ads to create an agency, it's like, this is just a total.
I know of some good agencies. I'm a fan of some agencies that we've interacted with. One of which we haven't worked with yet. But we have a decent agency right now. I like.
The truth of the matter is, it's not about the agency; it's about the person.
Yeah,
it's true. Life's about people. Yeah, right. Like a law firm is only as good as the people that are in it. Accountants.
So and I mean, we're getting off on a whole different tangent, but agencies have a model of the amount of clients that they take in should stay similar, if not grow by 5 to 10% than the people that are at the end of the life with the agency. Right. And so that's how they just kind of assimilate. And so it's one thing that Angel's always kind of talked about too, with like some of the individuals that we've had at the firm that bounce from law firm to law firm to law firm to law firm to law firm. He's like, they're just bouncing from one lily pad to another, man. They're finding safety for a little bit, and then they find the next place to land. It's the same kind of idea with agencies.
So basically, but yeah, let's not go down that. Like basically, you're Google. It's not a Google. You need to have an expert outside of them.
Yes,
do not rely on them.
I don't. So like with PPC, I refuse to use a full-on agency.
Yeah.
I will
we talked about.
And we've even had agencies pitch that to us, and like every single time
that's just never going to be as good.
Starts pitching that to me. And they start throwing me ideas, and it's like, man, we've already thought of that. We've already looked into it. It's you aren't coming up with anything new.
No, but here's what I will say. If you are just starting out, it can get you started because you are not as smart as they are.
Yes.
But at some point, if you are a business that is growing,
and you are actually focusing on learning it,
you will outpace it. And they're just not going to get to know your data at scale. So
no, and I mean, but here's the thing is we have enough history in our database that like, man, I know when the tests ran and when they didn't.
No, right.
Yeah. So like they're not going to.
But I do want to say for a listener out there who's saying, okay, well, if I don't have an agency, where do I start? Like, hey, in the beginning, if you are at the beginning listening to this, it makes sense. But you just know that eventually you are going to want to build in-house.
Yeah.
I mean, and any company doing millions of dollars in revenue, eventually.
Look, and here's my thing too, and there's a caveat to what you just said. Like, you're eventually going to want to go in-house. I think that it's actually intelligent to have one person that's holding your agency accountable. So, like, for example, like when it was just me after my predecessor left, I had nobody else in marketing. It was just me.
Right.
But we still ran with our agency, and we still worked really well hand in hand because I just genuinely didn't have all the time to do all the SEO stuff.
No, that's what I'm saying.
And that's
I think
fair.
It's worth it.
But at the same time, in terms of like, hey, if you're going to have an agency, don't just have an agency, just have an agency and your CEO is the person that they report to. Have an actual dedicated marketing
project manager
that's focusing on all of the things marketing in the firm.
Right.
So then that way they can hold the actual agency accountable. Like, hey, y'all, like this is what needs to get done. This is what hasn't been done yet. I've asked about this now 3 times. Like, you can go, and those are all negative connotations of what I'm saying for questions that you may pose. But
that's what happens.
Yeah. And so, but like, not even just that too either. Like, hey, I'm noticing this. Can we get this switched out? And like they jump on it and they fix it or whatever. That's one less thing that I have to do. I just send an email and it gets taken care of.
Right.
ChatGPT doesn't know how to actually just implement the development of what I want on my website yet, unfortunately, but it could figure it out.
It will eventually get there. Well, listen, we've been going an hour and a half. Did we miss anything?
I mean, we got off on a tangent just now about agencies. I can't remember what we were talking about.
We were talking about, I asked you about dedicated Google rep.
Yeah. Okay.
And basically the answer we came to, it's no.
Time out though. I actually have a different view on that. I have had one Google rep that if I could actually bring her in-house,
Mhm.
I 100% would. I'd have her
Well,
supplement with
is she your
with
Google
TK.
person?
She was fantastic. I had her for
What
over a
happened?
year. Then she got promoted. Like, that's the worst part about it. You do really good things in Google, you move up, and we no longer get you anymore.
I was just curious because
But yeah,
I think for anyone listening, don't rely on that. They can get you started,
Mhm.
but when you start spending significant tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you need to get a little smarter yourself.
Yeah, you need to have a dedicated couple people
Yeah.
that are operating in those terms, right? So like the biggest thing is too is, you know, if you're going to run Google ads, you've got to have daily carved out time to review that stuff. You can't just do it in terms of like what we were talking about before, like you have no life. Like I still do, but I still always have it in the back of my mind because I know that I'm accountable for it, right?
Yeah, you're spending money.
So if I'm looking at it in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening, like I know that what I look at shouldn't surprise me. If I look at it and there's a number that surprises me, let's shut that down so it stops surprising me, right? So, or let's make an adjustment to make sure that it's not surprising me, or find out if that number makes sense in terms of what it's brought back in, right? You know, but that's because we are at the scale that we're at. We're not spending tens of thousands in a month. You know, we're spending tens of thousands in a day.
Right.
You know?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and there's a lot of instances where, you know, a lot of these other firms that are running with agencies are spending tens of thousands in a month, or maybe even 10,000 a month. Exactly. You know, but the problem is with how competitive the space is. It's really tough. It's really tough to get off the ground when other people are spending, you know, like you're less than 1% of what other people in your space are spending. You are not going to get very big chunks of the pie off. You're going to get maybe a crumb or two. You know, like if you're really trying to
if
grow,
you're going to try to do pay per click, I mean, if you have some other magic referral basis,
exactly,
like you'd almost be better off in the legal space trying to do that.
Yeah.
It could be harder.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I will say this, Nick. Once you're on the crack, you're on the crack, and you got like, this is a crack business.
Yeah.
Because if you're relying on all of this stuff on pay per click,
Yeah.
and something happens, you know, that's risky.
Yeah, and the way that I kind of the way that we always talk about is drinking the Kool-Aid, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about and what we're trying to do in terms of scaling is you know, making sure like, hey, we're going to get rewarded in the end, but that's because we're spending so much now, you know, but we can only spend so much now based off of what we're making,
Right.
because we're not going to put ourselves into a hole. That makes no sense.
Right.
You know, we put ourselves into a hole throughout COVID, but we spent the whole next year and a half digging out of it, and we're not doing that again. You know, like that's never going to happen. And
right.
that's the way that I see it in terms of like, I like seeing the numbers in terms of like our inter-department meetings where we talk about how much money we're bringing in revenue. I still want to make sure that our revenue every month is outpacing what we spend in marketing, because what we spend in marketing is pretty astronomical. It's huge. But like, that's what any large scale firm is doing. Look at Morgan and Morgan, man. He's got some of the biggest spends on
really?
Google. And
like, what's a big spend for a listener? Like that, was he spending $1 million a day?
Yeah, probably across all of his campaigns. He's probably.
You think he's spending $1 million a day?
It would not surprise me.
Well, that'd be three. So they doing.
I don't know exactly.
600 million in revenue.
He's across all 50 states, I think.
Oh, he could be.
Yeah, he could be. He's his own lead generator.
I mean, if he's across the whole United States, $1 million a day is not a lot of money.
Yeah, no. But I mean,
if they're doing $1 billion in revenue, then.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if they are or not. Yeah. You know, I have to
feels that way.
Infer it feels that way. I mean, so Morgan and Morgan isn't really that prevalent in Texas. Please don't change that. But anyways, no, and like that's the big joke at LitiQuest is like everybody always talks about how big Morgan and Morgan is.
So they're the big juggernaut.
Yeah, so they're like they are the nation's largest law firm.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's like their biggest thing is like they're spending a good chunk of money. They haven't really ever said how much they spend, and I'm not going to say how much I spend.
No, I understand.
You know, like I'm giving you ballparks, but
no, but I just want for listeners to understand that you're not spending $1,000 a day. You're spending tens of thousands.
So how about I tell you this? A lead generator gets $100,000 from each individual firm. Right. I'm not going to say the lead generator. They get $100,000 from each individual firm, and they will blow through that $100,000 in a month. And they probably have upwards of 10 to 15 law firms that are getting leads from them. So think about how much they're spending, how much they're willing to spend, and what's coming from it.
And because the lead generator has to produce for the firm.
Mm-hmm. So go off of that metric rather than, me giving too much of my information and guessing what Morgan & Morgan is. Because if you realistically think about it, if you're spending $1 million a day, you're looking at $365 million in marketing.
And if you're doing $1 billion in revenue,
which I don't think that they're doing $365 million in marketing. I think maybe closer to $100 million might make sense, but not $365 million.
But they could spend $1 million a day.
Yeah, man. But they've got some.
That's big.
They've got big cases that come in, and that's the cool thing that I really like hearing about some of their stuff that they do is focusing on and seeing how they operate on those big cases. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I'm not an attorney. I don't have a bar card. You were mentioning that earlier. I wish.
Yeah, we're not. We're just. You're a marketing guy who here you're the marketing, IT, and solutions person. So, but listen, man. Thanks a lot for sharing all this. It's a fun conversation.
We could go on for a few more hours.
We could go on. You and I talk a lot. But for listeners, this was great. Thanks a lot, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone.